There's a specific moment when every nice girl realizes she's been playing a rigged game. Maybe it's watching the assertive colleague get promoted over you despite your superior qualifications, or realizing your accommodating nature attracted a partner who exploits rather than appreciates it. That moment when you're sitting across from someone who mistakes your kindness for weakness, and something inside you whispers that your entire approach to relationships and power might be fundamentally broken. Friedrich Nietzsche, the 19th century German philosopher who dismantled every comfortable moral certainty of his era, called this the slave mentality, and he spent his entire philosophical career explaining why societies create these invisible prisons specifically for people capable of greatness, especially for women who threaten existing power structures simply by refusing to remain small. You're here because the surface-level advice hasn't worked. You've tried setting boundaries gently, you've read the articles about self-care and assertiveness, you've practiced saying no in the mirror, yet somehow you still find yourself shouldering everyone else's emotional labor, managing feelings that aren't yours to manage, and watching less qualified people claim the recognition you've earned through excellence. Research reveals a devastating truth. Agreeable women earn approximately $1.1 million less over their lifetime than their assertive counterparts. Your niceness has a quantifiable cost, and that cost compounds every single day you remain trapped in patterns that were never designed to serve you. What you've been taught to call your personality is actually something far more insidious. It's a survival strategy you developed in response to a lifetime of punishment for female assertiveness. From childhood, you learned that being good meant being accommodating, that being likable required managing everyone's comfort except your own, that being feminine meant softening your edges until you practically disappeared. Nietzsche recognized this pattern in the moral systems of his time, observing how societies convinced their most capable members to police their own power. He argued that what we call moral is often just what keeps the threatening in check for the benefit of the mediocre. And he traced this psychological imprisonment back to ancient religious and cultural systems that feared human excellence. The exhaustion you feel isn't personal weakness. It's the natural consequence of living according to values that systematically benefit everyone except you. That voice in your head questioning whether you're being too much or too difficult isn't your authentic instinct. It's the internalized enforcement system of a moral framework Nietzsche spent decades exposing as a sophisticated form of control. He understood something that modern psychology is only now confirming. The qualities society most aggressively labels as virtues in women are precisely the qualities that ensure our continued subordination in relationships, careers, and every domain where power operates. Only about 2% of women ever break free from this conditioning completely. And the difference between that empowered minority and the perpetually overlooked 98% isn't talent, intelligence, or even opportunity. It's philosophical understanding. The women who command respect rather than beg for it, who attract devotion rather than exploitation, who build lives of genuine influence rather than quiet resentment, have accessed knowledge that operates beneath the surface level of tactics and tips. They've understood what Nietzsche called the revaluation of all values. The recognition that the moral systems we inherit are not neutral truths, but power structures with specific beneficiaries, and that liberating yourself requires philosophical rebellion, not just behavioral adjustment. But before we explore Nietzsche's revolutionary solution to this trap, you need to understand exactly how deep this conditioning goes, because what you think is your natural personality is actually a carefully constructed cage, and the lock has been hidden so cleverly that most women spend their entire lives defending their own imprisonment, calling it virtue, while watching others claim the power that should have been theirs.
Let's diagnose your cage with surgical precision. The nice girl operates from what Nietzsche called ressentiment, a French word he used because German couldn't capture the specific bitterness of powerlessness that pretends to be moral superiority. This is the poison that lives beneath your pleasant exterior, that seething awareness that you're being overlooked, undervalued, and exploited, combined with the psychological inability to address it directly. Instead, you tell yourself stories about being the bigger person or not stooping to their level, which is exactly what Nietzsche identified as the slave's impotent revenge, claiming moral victory precisely because you cannot claim actual victory. Picture the meeting where you present a carefully researched idea, watch it get dismissed with polite nods, then hear it repeated by a male colleague 20 minutes later to enthusiastic approval. You stay silent, telling yourself, at least the project is moving forward, while something inside you withers. Or consider the relationship where you've shaped yourself around your partner's needs, adjusting your schedule, managing their emotions, suppressing your own desires, only to realize they can barely name your current goals or struggles because you've become so skilled at making yourself secondary. Perhaps it's the family gathering where your boundaries are violated with cheerful expectation that you'll be gracious about it, where your time and energy are assumed to be communal property, because to assert otherwise would make you selfish or difficult. These aren't random misfortunes. They're the predictable outcomes of operating from what Nietzsche called herd morality, a system of values designed to keep the potentially powerful in check through shame and social exclusion. From childhood, you learn this system through 1,000 tiny punishments. The assertive little girl labeled bossy, while her male counterpart is called a natural leader. The teenage woman excluded from social groups for being too intense or too much. The professional woman passed over for promotions because she's not quite leadership material, despite exceeding every metric, while less qualified men with half her emotional intelligence rise effortlessly. Research confirms what you've experienced viscerally. Nice women are interrupted nearly 4 times more frequently in professional meetings, have their ideas attributed to others more than 4 times as often, and receive career penalties for the exact same assertive behaviors that advance their male colleagues. You tell yourself, "I'm just being considerate," while suppressing rage. You say, "I don't want to cause problems," while your boundaries are violated. You claim, "I'm naturally easygoing," while exhaustion from managing everyone else's feelings slowly hollows you out. This is ressentiment in action, the psychological mechanism Nietzsche identified where those without direct power seek moral superiority instead. The slave cannot overthrow the master physically, so she defeats him morally by making power itself seem evil and weakness seem virtuous. This is precisely what happened to female assertiveness over centuries of cultural conditioning. The qualities that would make women genuinely powerful were systematically reframed as unfeminine, unlikable, and morally suspect. The devastating truth is that your niceness doesn't make you more loved, it makes you more exploitable. Users can sense it like predators sense wounded prey. They're drawn to your accommodating nature, not because they appreciate it, but because they can leverage it. While you're managing everyone's feelings and ensuring smooth interactions, they're advancing their agendas without the burden of emotional labor you voluntarily assumed. The pattern repeats itself with eerie consistency. The partners who mistake your flexibility for absence of needs. The colleagues who treat your collaborative nature as permission to claim your contributions. The friends and family who assume your kindness means your time and energy have no value that requires respecting. Society gaslights you about this dynamic with breathtaking audacity, calling your oppression feminine grace and your cage natural temperament. You've been taught that accommodation is the highest expression of womanhood, that selflessness equals virtue, that being low maintenance makes you valuable. This Nietzsche would call exactly what it is, slave morality disguised as feminine ideal. The powerful convinced you that your powerlessness is actually moral superiority, that your silence is wisdom, that your self-erasure is maturity. They made you the enforcer of your own subordination by framing liberation as moral failure. The cost inventory grows more devastating each year. Career stagnation despite excellence, relationship dissatisfaction despite devotion, loss of authentic self beneath layers of accommodation, crushing exhaustion from emotional labor that goes unrecognized because it's expected rather than appreciated. You've become so skilled at attunement to others' needs that you can barely identify your own. The internal conflict becomes unbearable, knowing intellectually that you're being taken advantage of while feeling psychologically unable to change the pattern. The fear whispers its poison. If I'm not nice, who am I? Will anyone want me? Will I end up alone? This is precisely the fear that slave morality weaponizes to maintain its control. The nice girl identity isn't your authentic self. It's Stockholm Syndrome with your own oppression. It's the psychological adaptation you developed to survive in systems that punish female power. And every day you maintain it, you're choosing the certainty of slow diminishment over the uncertainty of philosophical rebellion. Nietzsche spent his career tracing moral values back to their origins in power dynamics, demonstrating through his genealogical method that what we call virtue is often just what the powerful need the powerless to believe. Now that you can see the cage clearly, you need to understand the philosophical revolution that can unlock it, and why Nietzsche's ideas were so threatening that they're still barely taught to women today.
In 1887, Nietzsche published On the Genealogy of Morals, a book so dangerous to existing power structures that it's still taught in sanitized versions that strip out its most revolutionary implications for women. This wasn't merely academic philosophy, this was intellectual dynamite aimed at the moral foundations of Western civilization. Nietzsche, the son of a Lutheran pastor who rejected everything his religious upbringing represented, dedicated his career to exposing how moral systems function as sophisticated power strategies rather than universal truths. What he discovered has profound implications for every woman trapped in the nice girl paradigm, because he traced the psychological mechanisms that transform the potentially powerful into the perpetually accommodating. The core of Nietzsche's revolution is the master-slave morality distinction, and understanding this framework gives you conceptual tools to analyze your own conditioning with devastating clarity. Master morality operates from abundance and creates values from inner strength. The master asks, "What enhances my life? What expression of my power brings me fulfillment?" Her value system is self-referential and life-affirming. She determines good versus bad based on what is useful versus useless to her authentic development. This isn't about dominating others, it's about sovereignty over yourself, the philosophical right to author your own existence rather than live according to values inherited from systems designed to control you. Slave morality, by contrast, operates from resentment and creates values from outer fear. The slave asks, "What threatens my safety? What power in others makes me feel inadequate?" Her value system is reactive and life-denying, built on the foundational distinction of good versus evil, where evil simply means threatening to my current position. Unable to defeat the master through direct power, the slave defeats her morally by making the master's strength itself seem sinful. Assertiveness becomes aggression. Confidence becomes arrogance. Self-prioritization becomes selfishness. The slave's genius is convincing the master to voluntarily adopt slave values, to police her own power, to call her own strength a moral failing. When a little girl is punished for being bossy while her male counterpart is praised for leadership qualities, that's slave morality conditioning in action. When a woman is labeled difficult for the same boundary setting that makes a man principled, that's the slave morality framework enforcing itself through social punishment.
when you feel guilty for prioritizing your own needs, or ashamed of your ambition, or anxious about being too much. That's centuries of conditioning, training you into reactive, resentful, life-denying patterns that Nietzsche identified as the psychological hallmark of oppression. Nietzsche's genealogical method traced moral concepts back to their origins in power dynamics, demonstrating that what we call virtue is often just what the powerful need the powerless to believe. Christian morality, he argued, represented the slave revolt in morals, the historical moment when the weak made their weakness itself a moral superiority and convinced the strong that strength was sin. The same mechanism operates in feminine conditioning. Women are systematically trained into slave mentality by making master characteristics seem unfeminine, unnatural, and morally suspect. Your niceness isn't inherent feminine self. It's a survival strategy you developed in response to punishment for displaying master morality traits. Everything in you trained to be good will resist this framework, and that resistance is precisely the slave morality fighting back. It will tell you that self-prioritization is selfish, that creating your own values is arrogant, that claiming power is unfeminine. But Nietzsche's radical insight was that life itself is will to power, the fundamental drive toward growth, self-overcoming, and the full expression of your capacities. Denying this drive isn't virtue, it's denying life itself. The exhaustion you feel isn't from living too fully, but from suppressing the vital force that wants to expand, create, and claim space in the world. Master morality for women doesn't mean becoming masculine or adopting male power strategies. It means transcending the inherited moral categories that Nietzsche explored in Beyond Good and Evil, moving past the slave's reactive framework of threat and safety into the master's creative framework of authentic self-expression. It means asking radically different questions, not, will this make me likable, but, does this enhance my power and life? Not, what do others need from me, but what do I actually value? Not, how can I avoid conflict, but what truth needs expressing regardless of others' comfort? The master creates values from inner abundance, while the slave adopts values from outer fear. Your nice girl identity is slave morality incarnate, reactive to others' needs, resentful of your own suppression, life-denying in its constant self-sacrifice. Nietzsche wasn't advocating cruelty or dominance over others. He was advocating authenticity, the philosophical courage to recognize that there is no universal morality, only power dynamics disguised as moral truth. Your niceness isn't inherent virtue. It's strategy learned under oppression, and what was once survival adaptation has become a self-imposed prison. Now that you understand the philosophical framework, let's apply Nietzsche's master morality specifically to the female experience. This is where ancient wisdom becomes modern power.
Nietzsche's path from slave to master isn't a personality transplant. It's a philosophical excavation. You're not building a new self. You're removing the layers of conditioning to reveal who you've always been beneath the nice girl performance. This transformation unfolds through 4 distinct stages, each requiring philosophical courage and practical application. Understanding the framework intellectually changes nothing. Embodying it changes everything. What follows is the complete roadmap from reactive accommodation to authentic sovereignty, applied specifically to the female experience across relationships, career dynamics, family expectations, and the internal landscape where your deepest resistance lives. Stage 1 is recognition, seeing your conditioning with unflinching clarity. This isn't about judging yourself for being conditioned. Every human inherits moral frameworks from their culture, but you cannot transcend what you cannot see. Start by asking diagnostic questions that reveal the slave morality operating beneath your conscious awareness.
When do you feel resentful while performing niceness? That specific combination of outward compliance and inner bitterness is resentment, the slave's impotent revenge, the telltale signature of acting against your authentic values. Notice the moments when you prioritize others' comfort over your genuine response, when you swallow your truth to avoid conflict, when you volunteer for tasks you don't want to do because someone needs to and you've been conditioned to be that someone. The recognition becomes visceral when you examine what follows your accommodating behaviors. Do you feel genuinely proud after prioritizing someone else's needs? Or do you feel exhausted and bitter? Authentic generosity produces satisfaction. Slave morality produces depletion. Track this pattern ruthlessly. Notice when you explain and justify your decisions to people who have no authority over your life. Observe when you feel guilty for having needs or taking up space or expressing preferences. These aren't personality flaws. They're conditioning markers, the psychological scars of being punished for master characteristics throughout your development. Recognition requires accepting this reality without using it as excuse for staying trapped. Stage 2 is revaluation, questioning the inherited values that have governed your life. This is where Nietzsche's method becomes revolutionary. He doesn't ask whether you're living up to moral standards. He asks who benefits from you believing those standards are universal truths. Take the virtue of selflessness that's been drilled into your female psyche since childhood. Who actually benefits from you believing that selflessness is the highest expression of womanhood? Not you. Those who consume your selflessness without reciprocation, those who've built their comfort on your self-abandonment, those whose dysfunction you enable by perpetually keeping the peace. Question everything you've been taught about what makes a woman good. Is keeping the peace actually virtuous, or does it enable patterns that corrode your self-respect while protecting others from the consequences of their behavior? Reframe the language that's been weaponized against female power. When someone calls you a difficult woman, ask yourself, difficult for whom? Usually for people who benefited from your compliance, who are now facing the inconvenience of your boundaries. The label isn't describing objective reality. It's a power move disguised as personality assessment. Examine the values you've never consciously chosen, but have organized your entire life around. Do you actually believe that being liked by everyone matters more than being respected by people who matter? Do you genuinely think that maintaining relationship status is more important than maintaining self-respect? Or are these inherited beliefs you've never subjected to philosophical scrutiny? Nietzsche's revaluation isn't about becoming amoral. It's about distinguishing between values that enhance your life and values that were imposed to limit it. Stage 3 is creation, authoring your own value system from authentic desires rather than inherited oughts. This is master morality in its purest form, the philosophical courage to ask what you genuinely value, not what you should value according to conditioning. What enhances your life force and vitality? What makes you feel genuinely powerful rather than safely small? Create your personal value hierarchy with ruthless honesty. If you truly value mutual respect over relationship status, then your decisions become clear. You'll choose being single over tolerating disrespect. If you genuinely prioritize authentic connection over social approval, you'll risk disapproval to speak truth. This isn't about adopting someone else's values or following a prescribed master morality template. It's about excavating what you actually care about beneath decades of should. A woman operating from master morality might value courage, creativity, intellectual depth, and reciprocal relationships. Her moral framework becomes, does this enhance these values? Yes, then it's good for me, regardless of whether it's nice or accommodating or feminine by traditional standards. She's not asking whether others approve. She's asking whether this choice aligns with her authored values. That's the distinction between slave morality's reactive, fear-based decisions and master morality's creative, life-affirming choices. Embodiment is living from master morality despite inevitable social resistance. This is where philosophy becomes practice and theory meets reality's friction. When you set your first real boundary, every conditioned part of you will scream that you're being selfish, that you're ruining relationships, that you're becoming a terrible person. That's slave morality's last defense, and Nietzsche would tell you to feel it, observe it, and refuse to obey it. The guilt isn't evidence you're doing something wrong. It's evidence you're dismantling lifetime conditioning, and discomfort means it's working. Apply this concretely across every domain. In your career, stop volunteering for office housework, the note-taking, the party planning, the emotional labor that earns no recognition. When asked, master morality gives you a simple framework. Does this enhance my professional goals and power? No? Then I'm not available for that is a complete sentence. Stop explaining and justifying. Slave morality negotiates with people who have no authority over you. Master morality states reality. When you produce excellent work, claim credit explicitly. The discomfort you feel about visibility is slave conditioning. Push through it anyway. In romantic relationships, embodiment means refusing to manage your partner's emotions as if they were your responsibility. When you set a boundary and he sulks, resist the conditioned urge to comfort, explain, or modify the boundary. Master morality recognizes that his feelings about your boundary are his to manage. It means ending the pattern of shaping yourself around someone else's needs, while your own go perpetually unmet. It means asking whether this relationship enhances your life or whether you're maintaining it from fear of being alone. Because Nietzsche distinguished between solitude, which masters often choose, and loneliness, which slaves endure while surrounded by people who don't truly see them. In family and social dynamics, embodiment looks like saying, "I can't make it," without the exhaustive justification slave morality demands. It means managing expectations by being selectively available rather than universally accessible. When your family expects you to absorb dysfunction with grace, master morality asks, "Does this enhance my life?" No? Then I'm not participating. Some relationships will end when you stop performing niceness, and Nietzsche would say those people were users, not genuine connections. They related to your accommodating performance, not your authentic self. The internal resistance is often more challenging than external pushback. You may experience identity crisis. Who am I if I'm not the nice girl everyone depends on? That disorientation is normal. You're dismantling a lifetime of conditioning, and the space between who you were taught to be and who you actually are feels terrifyingly empty before you fill it with authentic self. You might mourn the good girl identity, even while outgrowing it, and that grief deserves acknowledgement. You're losing the safety of approval and the comfort of familiar patterns, even though those patterns were slowly destroying you. Master morality isn't a destination, it's continuous self-overcoming. Nietzsche's concept of eternal return provides a decision-making tool. Would you live this exact life, infinitely, making these same choices, maintaining these same patterns? If the answer is no, then you've identified what needs transformation. Each boundary you set strengthens your capacity for the next. Each time you choose authenticity over approval, you're rewiring neural pathways that have operated on fear. Each moment you author your own value.
Philosophy transforms nothing until it changes behavior. Here are the specific actions that translate Nietzsche's master morality from intellectual concept to lived reality. Start with the one that scares you most, because that's precisely where your power is trapped behind the thickest layers of conditioning.
These aren't suggestions for someday when you feel ready. Readiness comes through action, not before it. Master morality is a muscle that strengthens only with use, and every day you delay is another day you're choosing the familiar cage over uncertain freedom. Action 1. The boundary audit. This week, simply notice every time you say yes when you mean no, every moment you accommodate against your authentic preference, every instance where you manage someone else's comfort at the expense of your own truth. Don't change your behavior yet, just observe with ruthless honesty. Awareness precedes transformation. Keep a note in your phone documenting these moments with Nietzschean analysis. Am I operating from slave morality here, reactive and fear-based, or from master morality, self-authored and life-affirming? This diagnostic reveals exactly where your conditioning operates most powerfully, and those patterns become your transformation roadmap. Action 2. The strategic no. Choose one low-stakes request this week and decline it without explanation or justification. Your script is devastatingly simple. I'm not available for that. Or, no, that doesn't work for me. Full stop. Notice the overwhelming urge to soften it, explain it, apologize for it. That's slave morality trying to negotiate with people who have no authority over your decisions. Master morality recognizes that your time and energy are finite resources, requiring strategic allocation, and every yes to something that doesn't enhance your life is a no to something that would. The discomfort you feel is conditioning breaking down. Push through it anyway. Action 3. Stop managing others' emotions. When someone responds to your boundary with upset, disappointment, or sulking, resist the conditioned urge to fix their feelings. Let the silence sit. Do not explain, do not comfort, do not modify your boundary to restore their emotional equilibrium. This is master morality in direct action. You're responsible to people, meaning you treat them with respect, but you're not responsible for them, meaning their emotional regulation belongs to them. The guilt will be excruciating at first. Observe it without obeying it. Each time you refuse to absorb someone else's emotional experience, you're rewriting decades of conditioning that taught you women exist to make others comfortable. Action 4. Claim your contributions explicitly. In your next professional meeting, when you share an idea, follow up with documented email. Script. Following up on the strategy I proposed in today's meeting regarding X. Name your contribution clearly and unapologetically. Nice girls let others claim credit to avoid seeming self-promoting. Master morality women document their value because visibility is career currency. The discomfort you feel about centering your achievements is slave conditioning trained into female socialization. Men don't experience this resistance, and continuing to obey it costs you measurable professional advancement. Start documenting, start speaking up when your ideas are repeated without attribution. Start requiring recognition that matches your contribution level. Action 5. The Eternal Return Decision Framework. Before making your next significant decision, whether to attend an obligation, continue a relationship, accept a responsibility, apply Nietzsche's eternal return test. Ask yourself, if I had to live this exact choice infinitely, repeating it through endless cycles of existence, would I make it? This question cuts through people-pleasing and should-based thinking to reveal authentic desire. If you wouldn't choose it infinitely, you have your answer. The life you're building is constructed from accumulated choices. Master morality demands that each choice affirms the life you actually want, not the life that keeps others comfortable with your smallness. Action 6. Reframe the guilt. When guilt arises after self-advocacy, after boundary setting, after choosing yourself, practice observational distance. Say internally, "That's my slave morality conditioning speaking. I see you, I acknowledge you, but I'm not obeying you." The goal isn't eliminating guilt immediately. That's decades-deep conditioning that won't dissolve overnight. The goal is stopping guilt from dictating behavior. Feel it fully, let it move through you, and choose master morality anyway. This is Nietzsche's amor fati in practice. Accept the resistance without being stopped by it. Love the difficulty as proof you're transcending limitation. Action 7. Curate your influences ruthlessly. Audit your relationships with one question. Does this person celebrate my growth or punish my boundaries? Who responds to your emerging authenticity with enthusiasm versus who responds with guilt-tripping, passive aggression, or withdrawal? Nietzsche would say, create distance from the life deniers, move consciously toward the life affirmers. Master morality means recognizing that you become the values you're consistently exposed to, and choosing your influences is choosing your future self. Some relationships will end during this transformation, those people related to your performance, not your authentic self, and their departure creates space for connections that honor who you actually are. These practices will transform your life, but only if you actually implement them. Your conditioning will resist each of these actions. That's not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's confirmation you're dismantling precisely what needs dismantling. If this feels hard, it's because you're undoing decades of training that taught you female power was something to fear rather than express. Start small because capacity builds with practice, but start immediately because transformation is a process, not an event. The women who thrive with this wisdom don't just understand it intellectually, they commit to the uncomfortable process of embodiment. The question is, are you ready to join them?
You now possess philosophical knowledge that 98% of women will never encounter. Not because they're incapable, but because society has every incentive to keep women in slave morality. Nietzsche's philosophy was dangerous in the 19th century, and it remains dangerous now. Dangerous to every system that requires your compliance, your niceness, your self-erasure. The question isn't whether this philosophy is true. The question is whether you'll have the courage to live it. Will you implement these teachings or merely appreciate them intellectually while remaining trapped in patterns that diminish you? Subscribe if you're committed to becoming a woman of master morality. We're building a community of philosophically sophisticated women who refuse to play small, who choose authenticity over approval, who understand that power isn't unfeminine. Powerlessness disguised as virtue is. Comment below with the first boundary you're setting this week. Your public commitment increases your follow-through, and your story inspires other women beginning this transformation. As Nietzsche wrote, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. Your transformation begins in the chaos of questioning everything you were taught to be. Choose master morality. Choose yourself. The cage you didn't know existed. Now you have the key.